I always find it interesting where exactly humans get our stories and why certain stories kind of resonate with humans over millennia. The quintessential story that we think about, I think, when we consider old stories, is the hero's tale. Sorry, I gotta be careful going over here. The hero's journey, some might say. And why that hero's journey resonates with us, why we keep retelling that story over and over and over again. Well, partly because it's something we experience as humans. Every once in a while there's a hero that comes and is forced to take a harrowing journey and against all odds, and it's an appealing story. But I think even more than just our own human experience, we find the hero's journey to exist not just humans, but also in the natural world around us. And I don't think there's any more quintessential hero's journey than that of the salmon. And here, where I live in the western Coast Range Mountains of Oregon, the coho are endangered, and even worse than the coho, I think, are the Chinook salmon, which they're not listed as endangered, but they might as well be. And they will likely disappear before the coho do. Got some stuff I missed yesterday. And the thing about salmon is there isn't a better example of sacrifice. There isn't a better example of, just an inherent love that a species gives to their offspring. So we'll talk a little bit about where the salmon go in their lives and why it is such a heroic journey. Sorry, we buried one of our cats in this spot about a year ago. I gotta be careful not to disrupt the grave. But I think death is a good segue. It's like, where do you start with a salmon's journey? I think you can start anywhere because it's a perfect circle. And I think we can start at death. So let's start at death. A fortuitous beginning. Now, salmon die in the upper reaches. They die in many places, but if for their journey to go full circle, they would die in the upper reaches of creeks like the one that I live in, or live on, drink water from, water our farm from. The forest grows upland from these creeks, and salmon have typically been one of the few nutrient inputs to forests, because if you think about it, forests, everything goes downhill from forests, but salmon actually return after feeding their bodies in the ocean, and they come uphill and they bring big fat bodies into the forest, which bears eat and shit in the woods and all of that good stuff. So that's kind of a salmon's death in a broader scale, but more on like a species scale. What salmon are doing is they are returning to the exact stream beds in which they are born, in which they are hatched, and they are spawning. And there's not really good ways, and science knows, and how salmon actually know to return to their original spawning grounds, but they do, and it's just inherent within them. And they come bearing bright globes of orange eggs, and their bodies are beat up. They come from the salt water, and they're not used to coming back to the fresh water, and their wounds never heal. And they race against the stream in the winter when the rivers are high and rolling and running hard. And they come up and they make it to their spawning grounds, and then they beat up their bodies as they build their redds, which are these beds in the gravel that are protected against the current so they can lay their eggs. And there they lay them. Their dying bodies lay their eggs. The male salmon follow behind. They fight with each other over the female eggs, and they drop their sperm in the redds where the little eggs sit. And then the salmon die. And their bodies are strewn upon the stream banks in which the bears and the eagles and all the critters of the forest feed, and go up and take those nutrients and spread them throughout the forest. So a sacrifice for the good of the whole, but also a sacrifice for their eggs and for the species of the salmon. And then in the spring, the little baby salmon hatch. They hatch and their mothers are gone. Their bodies swept down the rivers and back into the oceans, and or up into the forest where they've decomposed over the course of the winter. And there they are, motherless, little babies, with only their genetics to guide them towards a life in which they will eventually flow downstream and settle in a place where there's a little bit of salt water so they can get used to the feeling. And then they enter the oceans. And they course the oceans, and they feed off the stuff that has exited the rivers. And then one day, in their last year, they know they're gonna die soon. They head upstream, and they repeat the process over and over and over again. And so, to me, I feel like that is quite the hero's journey. It's a very heroic journey. It really follows the hero's tale well. In a hero's tale, you're going to leave home. Right? You have your call to action. Well, salmon did a call to action multiple times in their life, if you think about it. And then they return to home at the end. Heroes. All right, well, we got cut off there, but I was pretty much just rambling at the end there anyway. But I kind of stopped at the point of talking about how the salmon really typify the hero's tale. I mean, in ways that are, quite meaningful to me at least, and really shed light into kind of why these stories are important to us, because we find meaning in them, not just with our own lives or examples from our own human history, but also the world reflects those stories within different species. And in a lot of ways, people talk about how history rhymes, but I think life too also rhymes. I think there's cycles and things that we can recognize in nature that we recognize in ourselves, and we find meaning in that. And so that's why I think the hero's tale is very important to us. And I'm going to finish by talking about, shameless plug, Wild Coast Brew. This is a tea called the Heroine, and my wife and I have been making this tea for about 10 years. This particular blend just for ourselves, but we grow and forage the ingredients, and we put a coho salmon on the cover because it's a very meaningful, quintessential blend for us, and the salmon is a fish that we watch spawn in our own creek, so it's very important to us, and we see the heroine's journey as it happens. And I want to leave off by reading a little bit of what I wrote on the back. Drawn to the point where beginning and end intersect, the heroine enters an odyssey of obstacles. Her sinuous body cuts through the current like a flint-napped arrowhead. She is a force against gravity, chasing the ultimate sacrifice. In her death is the gift of life. There you have it. All right, well, thanks for watching. Bye.